Hey there. For this video I've put together some really basic and easy XPS foam steps. They look fantastic. You can make them look like stone, brick, concrete, whatever have you. And just, some balsa wood and toothpicks for the railings and balusters. It's fantastically simple and they look really nice. I do hope you get something out of this video and I hope you enjoy it. I'm using a piece of XPS foam that I've just cut to the depth and the width that I want for the steps. I used a coffee stirrer as my guide for the depth that I wanted for each individual step, and I don't have to measure if I use a little tool like this. For the first one I just used the coffee stirrer and cut out that exact width, and by exact width I mean roughly roughly that width. Nothing's exact. And for the second one, I use the step that I've cut initially, and then the coffee stirrer again. So that way I get the second step, which will be the width of the second step, and also the first one that'll be sitting on top of it. I do cut this as evenly as possible because I'm not measuring. It's not perfect, but it comes out good enough for, an example. And you can see how the stepping process works. It's so simple. I absolutely love it. And I just keep doing this process for as many steps as I want. There'd be lots of different ways of doing this. You could probably start out with one very sort of large one at the top and then step them down with the smaller ones. So you have a bigger sort of landing at the top of the stairs if you wanted to, or even like a tiny sort of a patio. You could figure it out as you go, but it's basically just this stepping. I'm going to remove the top one. I don't want that one because it just looks a little odd. Plus, I'm not going to put it on anything. I'm just going to put it together so you can see how I do steps. And I will be using, of course, water-based glue. Here's an example of some super glue, because anything fuel-based, as I'm always droning on about it, it will eat through your foam like acid, and it will keep eating through it as long as the glue hasn't cured. So if you use a thick, fuel-based one, it'll just keep eating really, really deep into it. You can see it bubbling away there, reacting like an acid. So yeah, that's it. Once it's finally stopped eating through it, that's just 3 little drops, and that's the damage it can do. So always use water-based glue. Even if you're coming near it to glue something else on it, just be careful you don't drop it on your foam. A sparing amount of the glue, so I don't want it squeezing out kind of like cream out of a sponge cake or something. Just enough to adhere it nice and neatly. Once it's thoroughly dry, kind of like overnight dry, I just give it a nice gentle sanding to even everything back out, because, I didn't measure anything and everything was as carefully put together as it could be done by me, but and this is how I make things so neat and tidy. I just, fix it once it's done. I just drew up and cut out a little kind of, I don't know, it's just a detail because it looks better in the thumbnail than just some boring old steps. But I just, cut very, very thin, the finest sliver I could cut. So it kind of looks like there'll be exposed brickwork underneath the concrete. I'm sure there's all kinds of things that you could do with steps. So many different ways of making them, but these little details I think are nice. They just give it a little extra something, a little bit of colour as well, which is I think what I was aiming for, just so it wouldn't be a block of grey. And I just redefine it and soften the edges a little bit with a pencil and draw the bricks in. These are very crudely drawn in, but it doesn't matter because it looks really, rustic. I did that with air quotations, very rustic. But it's nice, and I like the rough detail. Yeah, it's really good. Very basic. I don't mind the little gaps in the stairs. I will fill them a little, but, if you can't fix it, work with it. I'm going to drop the block of foam into my dirty brown, black acrylic wash. It's just, it's a sludge, but it stains nicely. And then I'm just going to get the little steps out of there. I didn't plan this very well. I probably should have used two chopsticks and pulled it out or something. I didn't think that far ahead. What a pain. I'll have to get a bigger jar or something. And finally, when I got them out, just let them dry. They look all foamy, but it's not a problem. That'll actually help them stain a little more, and it'll just sort of sit there as it dries, and those little tiny bubbles will disappear and all will be well. It's dried very nicely. Also had to note, when you do go staining things like that, make sure it's extremely dry glue, otherwise it will separate. Little notes of earthy browns, reddish browns. I only used a couple of colours because, I'm not aiming to put this on a diorama. I just wanted to make a rough example, but you get the idea. I used some texture paste and a little bit of white paint. That texture paste is from another diorama I did to make concrete, so it's already blackened. But I lightened it up a bit, make it a really delightful grey. And I just want to fill in some of the gaps. I don't want it completely, filled with lines the way I had it. I gave it a couple of coats like this. I'm using the brush instead of using something like a palette knife. I don't want to slather it on there and make it smooth. I want to make it look dappled like concrete. So I just dropped it down and very sparingly did it. And then I picked up again, the brush giveth and the brush taketh away. They're an excellent tool for doing all sorts of things aside from applying paint. My toothpicks that I have soaked again in the that brown stuff in the jar, and then a bit of white paint, and voila! I'll do a whole bunch in one go. I like to avoid making brush strokes on my work, and that's why I do this a lot with my painting. They've dried nicely, and they too look rustic, very rough, like peeling paint, and you can see the grain, which is excellent. I'm going to make the holes to slot them into. Never make your hole, if you're doing something like this, too close to the edge. You just might split it. It's been painted, so it's not so likely to happen, but there's a possibility that it could split, so just put it where it will go through and not break. I mean, it's not so fragile that, you're going to ruin it, but these things can happen with the foam sometimes. I just cut the tip at an angle off each of the toothpicks so I can slide the railing down at an angle that looks, feasible. I didn't do anything but eyeball this and thought, yeah, okay, that looks about right, as I do. But, it works. It looks good enough. And then I'm just going to measure, mark where I want the baluster to sit at which depth, and then how much I'll just roughly slide it down into the steps. Cut it off, give it a little bit of a reshaping with a file or something, and then just twist it in, and do twist it so again you don't go shoving it in there. It will expand a little from the the object going into it, and you could split it. So just gently twist it in. And this is a lot stronger than you think it is. It's just caution is needed though. Some nice orbs of some thick glue. And place that railing on. And just a bit of dirty sort of wash onto it, to make it look aged and all that good stuff, a bit grubby. Dirt definitely adds realism. Well, faux dirt anyway. And real dirt. But don't use real dirt on this, just use, a wash. That looks nice. Just kind of put it everywhere that it would be logically sitting on steps. I mean, I pulled up an image of steps, of concrete steps, so I could get my visual guide. You know, do the same thing yourself. If you're trying to make something, always use a real visual guide, as in, you know, a real image of something. And then you can look at it, examine it, and think, okay, I know I'm on the right track. I'm not just putting stuff here, there, and everywhere to make it look real, because you want to imitate the real thing. Once again, taking away with the brush, then putting it down again, taking away, just to soften as I work. And a little bit of greenery. Just some, you know, a couple of different greens, a darker one, then a little lighter one on top, just to do a little bit of a mossy effect. I mean, it's not perfect, but you get the idea that you could do a lot, even just with a little tiny set of steps. They were quite fun to make. I do like them. I'll have to find a building to put them on. Well, that's it. All done. And I don't mind that it oddly looks like sandstone with brick underneath, which is, yeah. Oh well, it was a learning experience for me, so I'm pleased with it. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time.